Pharaohs ruled with power, glory, and some very strange rules. Today we're counting down the top 10 weirdest traditions they were expected to follow. Some will make you laugh, some will make you cringe, and number 1 might just ruin the Nile for you forever. So, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and let's start with Number 10. The Pharaoh's daily divine duties. In ancient Egypt, the Pharaoh was also the high priest of every temple in the land. Each day, ceremonies had to be carried out at sunrise, noon, and sunset. Food, drink, incense, and cloth were offered to the gods. Their statues were bathed, dressed, and praised with hymns. Of course, one man couldn't possibly run across Egypt to do all this before lunch. So, priests had to step in. But everything they did was in the king's name. The Pharaoh had to keep himself pure, ready to step in, as if the gods might call him at any moment. Priests shaved their heads and bathed before entering the sanctuary, and the Pharaoh was held to the same standard. In a way, he was Egypt's head janitor and butler for the gods. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner were served daily to keep cosmic order. Think of it as a king being personally responsible for every candle and every prayer in every church, every day. Strange to us, but for the ancient Egyptians, it was the very core of kingship. But now, our story takes a sharp turn. Number 9. Pharaoh the Farmer. Despite the golden throne, the Pharaoh was expected to dig in the dirt. Festivals of the fertility god Min showed the king hoeing soil and watering fields. He even cut the first sheaf of grain at harvest. This was not for show, for it was a sacred duty to ensure the land's fertility. So, imagine the ruler of Egypt, dressed in royal regalia, sweating over a furrow in the sun. It sent a clear message that Egypt's prosperity rested on his work. And you know, the pharaoh's role as sower went further. Ancient texts tied his virility to the fertility of the soil. Some even suggested that his seed had to be proven, though scholars debate how literal this requirement was. What mattered was the belief that the king's vitality kept the Nile Valley alive. So, at public festivals, he traded his crown for a plough. He tilled, he sowed, and he harvested, symbolically feeding both gods and people. And if you thought a king with a plough was odd, wait until you see him in a fake beard and a bull's tail. Number 8. False beards and animal tails. Pharaohs liked a good dress-up. You've seen the chin-strap beards in the pictures. Just so you know, that wasn't just fashion. It was required, even for women rulers. The beard meant the pharaoh was divine, a living god in human form. Hatshepsut, the famous female ruler, wore the full set, beard, kilt, and cobra crest. It was her way of saying, "I'm king too, so deal with it." And then there was the tail. No, pharaohs weren't born with one. But they strapped on a bull's tail at festivals. It dangled from the back of the belt, swishing like it had business there. The bull meant strength and manly power, so the tail was basically a macho badge. The said festival itself may even get its name from the word for tail. Just picture it now, a small woman or a teenage boy with a beard tied on, crown shining, tail flapping. It looks like royal cosplay to us, but for the Egyptians, it was sacred uniform. After all, a king didn't get to choose the outfit, for it came with the job. And speaking of jobs, let's see how the pharaohs handled enemies. Number 7. The pharaohs' voodoo warfare. Besides fighting with armies, pharaohs also fought with magic. Yes, this was called an execration ritual, which is a fancy way of saying, curse your enemies with props. What happened was, priests wrote names of enemies on clay figures or red pots. The names could be rival kings, rebels, or even evil spirits. Then they added a few lines of doom for good measure. Next, they would smash the figure to bits, sometimes with spitting, or worse. The belief was that if you destroy the image, you destroy the person's power. Archaeologists have found piles of these cursed fragments near forts and tombs. Some shards even list dozens of enemy tribes who were erased in clay. By the New Kingdom, it was a full-on state ritual. One guidebook, the Book of Overthrowing Apophis, even instructed priests to stab and burn wax snakes. Apparently, this protected the sun god and, by extension, Egypt itself. So, while soldiers marched, priests were busy with what looks to us like midnight voodoo craft time. And if smashing clay figures kept Egypt safe, staying king took something more embarrassing. Number 6. The royal rejuvenation race. So, you've been king for 30 years. Congratulations. Now strip down, tie on your bull's tail, and run a lap in front of the nation. That was the Heb-Sed festival, the royal jubilee. It was meant to prove the pharaoh still had strength to rule. The first one usually happened in the 30th year of reign, then every 3 years or so. Think of it as an ancient job performance review, except it involved jogging. In this festival, the pharaoh wore a special Sed cloak, and he had to circle markers in the court. Sometimes he shot arrows to the 4 directions or wrestled a bull for good measure. The idea was to show he had the stamina to keep cosmic order going. So imagine Ramses II in his 90s, shuffling around the track while everyone clapped politely. Earlier, kings were even shown sprinting in tight outfits at Djoser's step pyramid. Some scenes show the pharaoh symbolically dying and being reborn as a young ruler. It was like a ritual reset button for kingship. From our view, it looks like a public fitness test for an old monarch. Kind of like asking a modern president to run a marathon on live TV before re-election. But for the ancient Egyptians, this was deadly serious. If the king could run, the world stayed in balance. And if he stumbled, order itself was at risk. So every pharaoh, no matter his age, had to prove he still had the legs for the throne. But proving a king could still run was nothing compared to proving a bull could speak for the gods. Number 5. Gods, bulls, and royal funerals. Now things get even stranger. You see, in the city of Memphis, the Egyptians worshipped a living bull as a god. This was the Apis bull, which was seen as the earthly form of Ptah, which was later tied to Osiris. And finding one meant spotting a black bull with just the right white markings. Once chosen, it was placed in a temple stable fit for royalty. Pharaohs showered it with gifts and even asked it for oracles. At festivals, the bull walked beside the king in processions. Basically, the message was, the gods were walking with Egypt's ruler. But the oddest part came when the bull got old. If it reached about 25 years, that was considered enough. So, rather than let it fade naturally, priests carried out a ritual killing. Some accounts even say it was drowned. After death, the bull received a funeral fit for a king. It was embalmed, mummified, and laid in a massive granite coffin. And these coffins, some of which were found in the Serapeum, are the size of small trucks. Anyhow, the burial was overseen by pharaohs or royal officials, like Prince Khemweset, son of Ramses II. Sometimes, even the bull's mother was killed and mummified too. And immediately after, the hunt for the next Apis began. So to us, the idea of a state funeral for a cow sounds absurd. But to the Egyptians, this cow was a god. And the pharaoh's role was to honor it in life and send it off in death. Caretaker first, undertaker later, and sometimes bartender. Number 4, the Festival of Drunkenness. Yes, the Egyptians had an annual festival where the goal was to get drunk. Apparently, it was sacred duty. The whole thing comes from a myth about Sekhmet, the lion goddess. And the story goes, she was about to wipe out humanity until the sun god tricked her with beer dyed red. She thought it was blood, so she drank herself unconscious and forgot her rage. Therefore, every year, Egyptians honored that miracle by drinking themselves silly. The main parties happened at temples, especially the Temple of Mut in Karnak. Beer flowed, drums pounded, people danced, and then they collapsed where they stood. Pharaohs were required to support it as part of their role as high priests. Hatshepsut even built a porch of drunkenness at the Mut temple for the occasion. Her inscriptions proudly describe renewing the festival of great drunkenness. So the idea was, by getting wasted, you helped keep Sekhmet calm. The pharaoh led prayers at night, then the drinking began in earnest. And by morning, the temple courtyards were filled with sleeping celebrants. One hymn even advised, "Come drunk and return home safely." We don't know if pharaohs joined the binge or just sipped politely. But either way, their presence gave the festival divine approval. And while the living honored the gods with beer, the dead honored the king with their lives. Number 3, servants in the afterlife. Now we're in the top 3, and things take a darker turn. You see, in Egypt's earliest days, when a king died, he didn't go alone. A whole group of his attendants died with him, on purpose. Archaeologists call it retainer sacrifice. At Abydos, in the First Dynasty Royal Cemetery, the evidence is clear. Beside each royal tomb are dozens, and sometimes hundreds of extra graves. Pharaoh Jer, for example, was buried with 338 people around him. They were arranged in neat rows, men, women, soldiers, and servants, all laid to rest beside the king. Even animals were included, like donkeys for transport in the afterlife. The idea was, serve the king in life, serve him in death. It was ritual, part of the state funeral. The burials suggest planning, sometimes even care, with goods provided. Some may have been poisoned or sedated rather than killed violently. But whether they went willingly or not is still debated. However, the scale makes the point. The pharaoh's power was absolute. Later Egyptians themselves must have thought it was too much. So, by the Old Kingdom, living retainers were replaced by little servant figurines. Those figurines, called shabtis, would do the work in the afterlife instead. It was safer for the servants and cheaper for the palace staff. Nevertheless, for about 2 centuries, though, loyalty meant an early trip to eternity. It was the most extreme employee benefit package ever invented. But anyways, moving on. If you thought fake beards and bull tails were odd, wait until you hear who the pharaohs were sleeping with. Number 2. Keeping it in the family. Yes, you guessed it. Pharaohs often married inside their own family. Sometimes it was a sister, sometimes a half-sister, and occasionally even a daughter. To them, it kept the bloodline divine. To us, it's one of the stranger parts of their world. Amenhotep I married his sister Ahmose Meritamun. Senwosret I also married his sister Neferu. Tutankhamun himself was born from a brother-sister union, which may explain his health issues. Rameses II married several of his daughters when he was older, and one of them, Meritamun, was even made great royal wife. Later, the Ptolemies, Cleopatra included, kept the habit going. The logic went back to the gods. You see, Osiris and Isis were brother and sister who married, so pharaohs copied that divine model. It also kept power in the family, with no chance of rivals sneaking in through marriage. A sister as queen was safer than an outsider with ambition. But the price was high. Some mummies show deformities and disease caused by inbreeding. Still, when no heir was clear, a daughter could become both wife and the path to the next king. So, yeah, to the ancient Egyptians, this was a royal privilege, part of what it meant to be a god on earth. Ironically, the royal family tree often wasn't much of a tree at all. It was more like a circle, or a wreath, if you want to be polite. And now, for the strangest custom of all, brace yourself, because this one takes divine duty to a whole new level. Number 1. The Sacred Nile Ritual. This is definitely the strangest ritual said to involve the pharaohs. Some accounts claim the king had to publicly masturbate into the Nile. Yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. The act was thought to ensure the land's fertility. This idea comes from the god Atum, who created life by doing the same thing in myth. It also connects to the god Min, a symbol of male fertility. According to the story, during a festival, crowds gathered by the river. The pharaoh would disrobe and perform the ritual at the water's edge. The symbolism in all this was, the Nile gave life through its floods, and the pharaoh gave life back to the Nile. And you know, in some versions, the men in the audience joined in afterward, which probably made for a very awkward group activity. But did this really happen? Some scholars doubt it. There is no solid evidence in temple art or inscriptions. The story mostly comes from Greek writers and over-literal readings of myth. Not a single carving shows a king in the act, thankfully. But why does a tale such as this survive? Well, it shows how far ideas of divine kingship could go. The pharaoh as a ruler was the embodiment of Egypt's fertility. So, if myths said he had to imitate Atum to keep the river flowing, then that was part of the belief. Whether true or not, the story is shocking, strange, and oddly funny. And it's one more reason modern leaders should be grateful their job doesn't come with that particular duty. And that's it. 10 traditions of the pharaohs, from odd to unbelievable. They show us a world where kings were gods and rituals shaped reality. Strange or not, it all made sense if it kept life in balance. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and maybe raise a glass to the ancients. Just not the way number 1 on our list did.